Thursday, everybody, and Matthew's back. We appreciate that. Brian, you're here, and we got a ton of stuff to talk about today, gang. We're going to talk about baseball. We're going to talk about CFP and what's going on there, and we've got we're waiting for the exact news of possibly one of the most iconic franchises in sports history uprooting. And it's hard for me to believe, guys, that there might very well by the end of the day be two NFL teams in Indiana.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that announcement goes. The Bears announced that but they wouldn't even tell that city, exactly what it's
Right.
about. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's start talking about Major League Baseball. And we know that once these two stadium deals get finished, the one in Vegas, and then by the end of the month, the one from the Tampa one will be finished, and so that will mark the end of the potential of teams moving to other areas, which baseball. When Rob Manfred, he's scheduled to retire in after the 2030 or 2031 season, and so they want to expand before then. And right now, the two hot areas are Nashville on the East Coast and Salt Lake City on the West Coast. And I'm sorry, West. I shouldn't say, and I should say East and West, because neither of them are on a coast. So let me qualify that. Let's Brian, you got some interesting take on that. Let's dive in there.
Where to start? First, kind of preface, not being a huge baseball fan, there's probably going to be some of my opinions that might, dare I even say, offend some folks in terms of what I would do in terms of systemic changes. But I do think of both of those as expansion teams and also a couple more. But I think what baseball really needs to approach right now, and we've seen some talk from them about it, is they need to finally address just how their league operates. It's built and based off of an old model of certain specific large markets absolutely dominating, and in decades since then, we actually see that in this country that other markets have risen, and then some of these dominant markets have actually plateaued and in some cases even digressing, to where if they really want to do future growth, they need to not just focus on a few markets, they need to focus on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a two-pronged approach: is a larger expansion, but also a reworking of the leagues and the divisions within the leagues. I think the biggest miss that they have going right now in terms of where baseball is actually followed is the Southeast. I think having one team in Atlanta and two in Florida just doesn't quite do enough. I know that there's a bit of a lack of large population centers there to work with, but you at least have Nashville and you have the North Carolina growth area. So in term, I don't know your thoughts on that as well, Matthew, but I would do all four. I would do those. I would do Salt Lake City, and I would do Austin.
Yeah, the biggest problem with expansion is going to be how you're able to fill out a roster. And the matter of the fact is, right now, there's not enough major league level pitching to fill out 30 staffs, much less you go to 34. Then you're talking about really kind of almost, I guess, degrading the product that you're getting on the field as well, because there's not enough guys that are major league level pitchers to staff them all right now. And it would be, I'm sure it would be like a leveling off of the playing field, but I guess if you're in favor of more runs, that would be a way to provide them.
Yeah. Is there still in baseball where you see certain teams really stockpiling pitchers, and then all the others are kind of having issues at doing that, or is there just an overall lack?
Well, it's a bit of a stockpiling in certain places. I mean, you look at the top bullpens in Major League Baseball, and you would probably accuse them of stockpiling, whether they signed, traded, or developed these guys.
Mhm.
But it's just the overall depth down in AAA has diminished. The overall depth in minor league baseball has diminished with NIL, and everybody's staying in college baseball as well now. So the levels of depth that you have diminished in the professional aspect of baseball at this point too.
Would you say though that when your talent diminishes due to college NIL because guys are staying there longer, it's really just kind of a resetting of the norm, meaning there's going to be this initial wave of having less guys, but eventually that normalizes and you get your normal amount of guys coming. They're just coming to you a year later. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's just when you're talking about expanding, you have to have a product on the field in terms of what you're doing. I think they can manage it with 32. I don't think it's going to, have that effect. But they're middling franchises, and everybody points to like the Rockies are the big one right now. But some of these franchises, there's just there's not the talent out there to staff. Somebody has to be bad at all times, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's probably never going to change though, but would you agree that kind of the way that Major League Baseball has built itself as a system, that it very much is about pushing the major markets, and these others, it's really hard to build a following if you're generally always going to be one of the programs that gets kicked around. Like from being here in Arizona, I wanted to, when I moved here, I wanted to embrace the Diamondbacks. But as I went to their division, I went to a couple division games. I think both were against the Giants because my wife was from San Francisco. It was kind of felt more like I was at a Giants game. And I think that some of these markets, it might be better off to not have them with these other teams that might dominate that way. Like I think that the Diamondbacks need to be built up in that regard. Colorado Rockies. I think actually moving them east to be with the Texas programs, teams might be better. And then just having like your West Coast division instead of having the Angels and the Dodgers split up, instead of having the White Sox and the Cubs split up, instead of having the Mets and the Yankees split up. These are the type of games that you can just sell tickets to over and over and over again. I just think if you make maneuvers that better regionalize these divisions instead of just setting them up to put major markets into the playoffs, I think that you could get a much better following in those areas. And dare I say, maybe start to bring baseball back in the younger ages. And that's where I say that this might be a systemic problem where they have really kind of minimalized the perceived value of baseball to a lot of people coming up in this country. And I don't know if, them not having enough players it's just because they don't have enough players or because they have not really done a great job of building the sport at the lower level, because people get connected to your local teams. And one of the areas of the country where kids are still into baseball more than anywhere else, it seems, is in the Southeast. And I think just saying, well, you either follow the Braves or you follow a couple of teams in Florida. It's just, I just don't think it serves the league very well personally. And I get what you're saying, like short term, these are considerable problems to face because you have to put a product out on the field. But, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean that's why when expansion comes, you're probably getting that team in Nashville.
Sure.
I think they understand that it's a market, but I also think that they feel the product that is developed for that market is one of their best brands in the Braves. And it helps the way that what Ted Turner was able to do in the 90s with that team to build them into a bit more of a national brand as well, considering they're essentially, they've been your brand of the Southeast for forever at this
Since
point.
1969.
Yeah. So I think that's why when they expand, they're going to add, but that's also why they've been a bit content with it, I believe, just because of the strength of the Braves brand. And I guess relatively short travel times, considering where the Southeast is, like how you're able to get in and out of Atlanta, it being the hub. I guess my backup question to you, you're talking about realigning and putting cities in cities, but sometimes the cities and cities matchups, they don't draw the same. Like Chicago, the White Sox and the Cubs has nothing on the Cubs and the Cardinals in terms of what you're going to get as a ticket draw. And some of those divisional matchups that have been built, some over time, some through success, whatever it may be. I wonder if I don't know if the inner city matchup would be able to challenge that, because I don't see the Cubs and the White Sox as a big inner city rivalry whenever they face off, but the Mets and the Yankees absolutely, but the same with the Dodgers and the Angels. It's the Dodgers and the Giants have more history than the Angels and the Dodgers do.
Sure, because they compete for playoff spots.
Yeah,
like that's what and so just I haven't given a layout yet, but starting with the first one that you have, the Chicago and St. Louis situation. Like I would definitely have a 6-team division there where you have both Chicago's, but you do have St. Louis. So you still have that connection to Chicago, but you also have Kansas City. So now you're building a relationship there for St. Louis and Kansas City, which it's not like, I get the whole cross league play, like, and they only sell so many of those because it doesn't have ramifications for the playoffs hardly at all, other than it's just a win and a loss. It's not part of a division race. But if you stick them in a division together, that changes immediately. Like now that crosstown rivalry is for everything. It's for knocking each other out of the playoffs. So that's right. And then, on top of that, with those four, you'd have Milwaukee and Minnesota, whom Milwaukee's kind of been left out of this whole thing, despite the fact that how close it actually is to North Chicago, where
it's 90 miles away.
But yet it as he brings up very, astutely, is this, I remember as being a follower of baseball when I was younger, it's all about the Cubs and Cardinals. It's why I would take the Reds out of there and move them into a different division. It's why I would have Pittsburgh in that division with them and Cleveland. You take these local regional rivalries and you also add in the extra value of it being for the division. And I think it kind of revolutionizes those. Yeah, the Cubs and the White Sox don't sell well. It's because it's cross league, doesn't have a whole lot of effect on playoffs race. But if you stick them in the same division and they're going off, man, that is a war, north side to south side, all baseball season long.
Well, they've drawn well whenever both teams have been competitive.
When it matters more than.
So the real problem is competitiveness. If they're not competitive, then they don't show up. I've noticed, that the 21 years now. Was it 21 years? No, let me try. No, not 21 years. Almost 21 years of the Orioles Nationals, and surprisingly early in that scenario, they didn't draw it. I mean, the Nationals, it would be the Orioles would show up in Baltimore, but wouldn't come to DC, and the DC folks wouldn't come up into Baltimore. But over the years, there's been a really good situation where now you've got Oriole fans, which you've always had in Washington, but you've got Nationals fans, which you've always had, which were cultivated in the Baltimore area.
Yeah, new patterns of behavior take some time to form. Accepting new changes, especially in the kind of the baseball faithful, who seem to align more along the lines of tradition. That's why I get like some of this would be a tough pill to swallow for some folks. But, up in that northeastern area, I just have to look at it and go, how does one not want to have the 6-team division of Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, New York Mets, Philadelphia Phillies, DC Nationals, and Baltimore Orioles? Like that one on its own with all those games selling locally, but also the matchups for networks. Heck, that alone carries the deal. And then you top that off with your California teams all being together. How much would maybe Oakland still be in Oakland if Oakland and San Francisco were in the same division this whole time and had, the constant rivalry for the playoffs? That certainly would have been a fun crosstown rivalry. I think that they are behind in doing this, and there's going to be some difficulties, as Matthew's very well pointed out. For rosters, that's a big deal. But at some point in time, I think they need to address this, because you have all of these emerging and growing markets, whereas some of the ones that they've relied upon to carry the league, there are some very real indications of stagnation and maybe even decline. I mean, not to get too political about it, but even the New York Stock Exchange is now under attack by a startup in Texas. So I just think that for the future, Major League Baseball needs to embrace the rest of the league, not just their major markets that they have split up into divisions in order to increase the odds that all of those major market teams make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, well, part of it too is an overexposure, and I think that's something that causes that you can't build rivalries or national brands if you're only watching the same national brands every week.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, pretty much every matchup of the Yankees and the Red Sox on national television. There's never been any variation in that. They always get the national spotlight regardless of who else is playing on that weekend.
What, guys, you do know more about this. What would be the value of, say they were to do this thing and go much more regional with their divisions? Like, kind of, we're seeing I guess you might say, the dying of the regional networks, the more localized networks. But if you do, I mean, that's how the Braves were built up, right? Through TBS.
Yeah.
Because I just think that there's so much more value for, folks in St. Louis and Kansas City if their matchups mean something. I mean, that Kansas Missouri cultural rivalry they got there is a for real thing.
There's the Kansas City. When we talk about the matchups that they do when they the rivalry matchups, what they do when like you said, the Dodgers and the Angels play each other. It does matter in some places, but you can't manufacture it. Because I know that a lot of Pirate fans are upset because instead of giving them Philly as their rival, they end up with Cleveland. And that used to be a great football rivalry, but it sure as hell isn't a baseball rivalry because they never played each other.
Yeah. And those are the type of things where I just want to be careful because, local sensitivities. But having gone through that, there's quite a distance between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And, we have state borders and these have, cultural connotations to them. But just in terms of distance, Philadelphia is an East Coast city. It's right there with the DC and the Baltimore and not that far from the New Yorks and New Jersey. Whereas between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh is quite a bit of distance and a whole lot of rough terrain, but and kind of the history of Pittsburgh is one I would say is much more similar to that of the Ohios. If you had Cleveland and Cincinnati in a division together, that matters. If you have Pittsburgh in with them and you have Detroit in with them, there's a whole lot of shared history about how those cities have gone in the past and how they're now looking at their futures and rejuvenating. I just think despite the in-state connection, that I just think like it looks to me like Pittsburgh is just so much more akin to these other cities. And some people might not like that, but
here's where I would go a different way on that. And let's see, we got a question here from the other guy. Baseball died September 2024 in East Oakland. MLB's second team in Northern California with 16 people in the mass. Yeah, I can't. If I delved into the missteps in the Oakland ownership situation over decades, we'd be here for another couple of days. That's just been mishandled by baseball from the jump. And when they had ownership issues, and I'm just finishing this up for the questioner. When they had ownership issues, San Jose would have been where the A's should have been playing, because San Jose had a stadium ready. They had ownership tight. That would have been no pun intended, a home run. The money's in San Jose. That's where most of the tech companies are. But the Giants blocked it because they said, "Well, that's our that's our region." Well, the Giants don't need San Jose. The Giants already have San Jose. It would have saved, and poor ownership over the years has also been a problem there. But anyway, I'm sorry about Oakland moving to Vegas, but unfortunately, they just couldn't find an ownership group and a government that could get along with each other, and that's just unfortunate, because for decades that was. There's some real history with that Oakland team. Reggie Jackson and all that the stuff that Oakland had. They played some phenomenal baseball in Oakland, well before the Billy Bean situation. But anyway, let me fly back here just for a second. One of the strongest divisions in the National Football League is Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. So I think if you threw that in with and added to it maybe DC, because of the regionality of it, I think there's a lot more juice in that one, because they already have built-in rivalries in their football situations, and it's not that far travel wise to go to those games. And I don't know. That would be a mixture. I wouldn't.
You could
be successful,
but you'd have to have like those three to the west, and then you'd have to probably also have to have Philly in there. So there's your 6-team division. So then you got to figure out, okay, what are we doing with Detroit? What are we doing with Toronto? Are we just going to put those in with the 2 New Yorks and Boston? Is that a good combo? Which one gets you more and better? That's a debate that, a lot of people could have. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that I think the best. I just kind of land on, I would build that super division of, the New York, Boston, Philly, DC, Baltimore. And while we've had that discussion on the Baltimore Pittsburgh connection and how the people there would feel that, I also think, though, that when you put them in division with a divisional race, and you already said that there is kind of a growing thing between Baltimore and DC, I think that is just so easy. There isn't, I'm sure that if you had the Ravens and the Redskins in the same division, it would be a monstrous, right? But they're not even in the same conference.
Well,
So it doesn't really happen. I mean, they don't even play most years. So that's, I guess maybe I'm saying while it makes sense culturally, it's there. It's a bit of apples and oranges because there hasn't been an opportunity for the Ravens and the Redskins to build up something. I've not even the Redskins now, I'm just calling by their old name.
The Commanders.
But there hasn't been an opportunity to build that rivalry there. So I would argue if there had been, you might see that's where people would actually go if they had the opportunity.
Could be.
So, in all of this, I'm now curious because we've used them as a reference point already. Where do you have Atlanta sitting in all of this?
Being the center of the Southeastern Division, I would have Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Miami, Nashville, whom I would call the Nashville Notes. And then I would have a Carolina team because I think that is a growing area. A lot of money's going down there. And, when you're trying to sell tickets to 162 games a year, you need a place where people aren't too far away. There's a lot of surrounding local cities and where they have enough money to take some time off of work now and again, or just to not even be off of work, the tech side that's going in there and people can be away from work. I think that's a great place to build up in. I don't know if I can necessarily call them rally as the team. Like, you might have to embrace the whole Carolina thing. But that's where I would do it, and I would have Atlanta be the center of it. I just don't think that, despite the way, of course, Atlanta has marketed and said, "Hey, we're the South's team." Well, of course, they're going to say that. That's a huge thing for them. But I would say that there's probably a lot of fans potential fans, that actually don't care about them because there's no real representation of their area. And I guess that's kind of why I like the idea of marketing a Nashville team, not a Tennessee team, because a Nashville team that's kind of themed based upon, the country music scene and everything. That's something that also can reach across the South. Kind of like the way the Braves do. So that's what I would do. I would give the South their division.
So then it would be kind of like the NFL deal, right? Because that's how the NFL plays again.
Yeah, I mean, that's as much as of a melting pot as we are in this country, we do have very specific regional cultures and connections within those. And having Florida teams playing New York teams and Atlanta playing New York, I just think it misses the target. I would let Atlanta be the Rome of the South within their own division and be the monster of the South, right? Just as the Yankees are in the North or something like that. Let them and make the others, kind of push against it. Let the two Florida teams be in the same division and actually have a real rivalry. I mean, we can't get Miami to sell tickets or whatever. Well, let's have a rivalry with Tampa Bay. That's just my opinion on it. It's like, instead of dividing them up and trying to force them into all these, dare I say, kind of corporate made divisions, like embrace the local cultures that go along with differences in location.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing is with the South, excuse me, with the South, I think the issue there is there's like civic pride there, and it's kind of like you're building. And Matt, I'd like to hear you on this. it's almost like building the Southeastern Conference in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wonder because how well ingrained I think the Braves are. I wonder how well you would be able to not only pull from one, but pull from two different. Like you're pulling two teams you're pulling a fan base for two teams instead of one, out of what is, while probably the largest population in the South, two very dense areas close together, almost in that small triangle. And I guess the other part is it's hard to expand out to like Louisiana as well and keep I guess the same regional aspect.
I wish New Orleans was what it was, because then that's an easy pick. But unfortunately, it's not. Nashville and North Carolina are the two big growth areas, as well as Atlanta. And I guess I totally respect the point about taking from Atlanta. I'd say that's kind of like are we saying that there is no potential? We can't get new fans, like people in Nashville, people in North Carolina who maybe aren't Braves fans because they don't really connect, and so they don't really have like a Major League Baseball team to follow, so they just don't. While some people there will still continue to follow the Braves, so that's their team. I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize these locations. Plus, Nashville and North Carolina are locations for people who have come there not just from the South, right? Like from the North, from out West. These are places that are bringing in people, and I don't think that those people coming in are just going to be Braves fans. So if you're really trying to capture them, I think, and have some civic pride, I think giving them their locational teams is a good step towards maximizing the potential of the league versus kind of this I don't want to call it the old way of thinking that Atlanta carries the whole South, when I don't think that's as much the case anymore. I think that through SEC is a good example. Is there is also rivalry within the South. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. I could be wrong. I think that place is just so huge for baseball, that area of the country, that you just need more local options.
Yeah, the need of another major league, at least one Major League Baseball franchise in the South, I think is very apparent.
Yeah, and if you're only going to do one, Nashville is like, I got a guy who talks to me about the rally side and everything going on there, which is impressive. And they hate to hear it because they say they're farther along than even the Nashville side. But if you're going to pick one to try and help get the South into it, I mean, it is Nashville. That Nashville music culture covers the whole South. But like I said, I think there's a very specific culture that is building in North Carolina, and it's kind of a hodgepodge, of mixing pot of all the different people who are coming there. And I think if you give them something, you have football there, and now you have hockey, which is doing really well, and people are getting behind that. I think that you would see the same thing happen there. Like, even if it's located in Raleigh, you'd still have people from Charlotte and some of the other local cities there that when in combination, it's probably enough that could carry it. I could be wrong, but I just think that you don't have a lot of other options in the South.
So you're saying that bring in Nashville and Raleigh at the same time?
Along with Austin and Salt Lake City.
No, I get that.
Yes.
I'm just saying that.
But yes, in the same
saying
division, even, because then now you have your two startups. That becomes a rivalry of like comparing like who's growing faster from the start. That whereas if you do one first and then the other later, well, one gets a head start. Like, if you're gonna do them both and you're gonna do this realignment, do them both now. Set them off at the same time. And I know that's hard. I get that. I hadn't even thought about the angle in terms of having the personnel to do it. But in terms of building these brands, I would not give one a head start over the other. If in the long run, I'm looking at it saying I would like to have both in the South. I would just figure out a way to logistically make it possible and give those two brands an even start out of the gates.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem, another problem, but the challenge is Miami, and
It's really been tough, hasn't it?
it's been tough. And here's
It's crazy. It's crazy. You would think that would be huge there because of all the Cuban influence and how much they love baseball.
Yeah, but the problem is the soccer team outdraws them.
Sure.
So I think the biggest problem there is Miami gets their biggest gates when the New York teams come and play, and Boston, and it's kind of like everybody. It's when the Northeast teams come down there, that's when they fill the building, or not fill the building, but do better than 11,000 on a given night. Whenever there's 20,000 people on the same night over watching Inter Miami playing, God knows who.
Matthew, how well does Miami do versus Tampa Bay? And also, obviously, you too, Jim. You know Tampa Bay really well.
Yeah.
The problem with Tampa Bay is even though they build a good product, they still don't seem to fill the stadium with any sort of consistency. And I will say I've been to the Trop before, and people may disagree with this opinion. It is not a fun building to watch baseball in personally. There's no aesthetic appeal. It doesn't, the roof almost feels like it's kind of harsh on your eyes, the way it lights the building. It's not a place that I enjoy watching baseball. I think part of it is when they get into a new building, that's going to help them just about more than anything.
Okay, well, that's pretty interesting right there, because I just feel like people kind of, I like to do geography a lot, and I think people lose focus on just how far away from everyone else Southern Florida is.
Oh, yeah.
And I consider Tampa to be part of South Florida, even though it's Central Florida, but it is down the peninsula, and it is the closest thing that Miami folks have. And I think that and we're talking now the fourth most populous state. And I just think that you need to have your teams competing against each other and have that local connection.
Yeah, let me weigh in on the Tampa Bay situation, given the fact that I think I've written about it for the last,
just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, 200 years. The problem was, and Peter Uberoff, who was the commissioner at the time, told them not to build the Trop, because that was when Jerry Reinsdorf was playing that game where Reinsdorf was saying that, the Chicago White Sox were going to move to St. Petersburg. Now, nobody on this planet who knew baseball and knew Reinsdorf, who is a potential, serial liar, was going to do that. He was using St. Peter's leverage to get what he wanted, which was a new Kaminsky Park, which, by the way, if you've ever been there, is horrible. It doesn't look like a baseball park in any state, because the funny thing is, the year after that, right, that's when Camden Yards came in. So basically they started Camden Yards a year after. So they went to retro, and meanwhile, the two stadiums, the Trop was built, and it was a disaster from the day one because it was outdated before it even got started. And here's the key to why. I've been battling this. Why can't Tampa Bay, draw people? Well, Andy Zimbalist, who I mentioned to both of you before, who was brought into Major League Baseball and said, what's the deal on when you put a franchise in, or you build a stadium? What he says, the stadium has to be within a basically a 1 hour commute of 60% of their fans. If they're not, then you can't, you're not going to build anything. The thing with St. Petersburg is you got to cross two bridges and you can go, just you can come there by crossing two bridges or a causeway to get to the stadium. West of the stadium, which, by the way, west of the stadium is only 5 miles, is the Gulf of Mexico. So unless your audience is a bunch of groupers, you got no problem. Now, if you take the Tampa Bay Rays television audience, their television audience is a top 10 TV audience in Major League Baseball. So when the Rays are playing on television, people in the Bay Area are watching. But I can assure you, I live there, and I can tell you that crossing those bridges are not fun.
Yeah, see, that's local knowledge that has to be kind of brought into the conversation.
So the new stadium, which is what they're, by the end of the month, they'll have that buttoned down. And I've written way too much about that. Is going to be over across the street from the football stadium. Everybody knows where the football stadium is because they can get there. And basically, you're going to have a new stadium, which is going to have what, in essence, is a glass roof. So, from that standpoint, it's if it's dark outside, it's going to look like it's dark outside. It's not going to be the Trop where you hit the third ring and I don't know what the hell ground rules it is now. It's a mess. And so I do believe, that they'll draw well. Well, they're not going to draw Braves type of numbers yet, but they certainly will do a lot better because I can tell you there's a lot of the audience of fans who might go on a weekend game, but you're not going to get them during the week. Because if you have to go from East Tampa to the Trop, that's about an hour drive because of the traffic situation. And God forbid somebody breaks down on the bridge, you're doomed. You better bring your fishing pole because you're going to stay there for a while.
Yeah, that's definitely something I understand because you get the same thing here in the Phoenix area with daytime trying to get down to the stadium in downtown Phoenix for people across the valley. And that has to be taken into account of like where people in your area there are the ones who are going to carry this based on ticket sales, not just, network viewership.
Well, ticket sales is the number 2 revenue source in Major League Baseball.
And it needs to be improved somehow. I mean, 162 games a year, you've got to try to find ways to increase that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. You want to talk about Seattle, Salt Lake now, and Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same thing as we just talked about, where I would want to, if you're going to do a Nashville team, you're going to do a Raleigh team eventually, you do them at the same time. And you put them in the same division so that they have, it's a new rivalry. I would do the same thing out west. I would have Salt Lake City and Austin at the same time in the same division. Salt Lake City with Arizona and Colorado as your 3 mountain teams for that division, and then Austin, Houston, and the Texas Rangers as your 3 in Texas. To me, starting off same time adds a bit of rivalry to 2 teams that otherwise would have very little connection, other than the tech industry is moving into both of those cities and financial. But it allows them to not one to get a head start on the other. I think Austin is kind of a culture of its own within Texas. It's grown large enough. There's enough money there. They can support a team there. I don't know how far along the process is, but that's one that could easily be supported. clearly Salt Lake City, despite the size of the city only being like 250,000, the overall area there is much higher, and the wealth status of the area is probably enough to carry it. So I think putting them in with Arizona and Colorado is a smart choice. It pulls Arizona from being dominated by the California programs, because there's a lot of California fans here. And so they only come for when their team comes. So it kind of dominates the situation. I think that would be a healthy change. Build up a little rivalry between Colorado, Salt Lake City, and Arizona. And that's how I would do that. I would have, Salt Lake City. I don't know. I think when we talked, it was like go with like the explorer concept, tech exploration, as well as old traditional historical exploration in the area. Austin algorithms, just tech central, and then just as kind of something to piss off the new rivals, it's the Austin Algos versus the Houston Astros. There's a little bit of a connection there.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Let me jump back for just a second. You were talking about Salt Lake in that division. Did you put Vegas in there?
No. I am maintaining that connection with Oakland as much as possible, either on a love side or on a hate side. I would have Vegas in with the California teams and with Seattle, because I think that the one thing that they've really messed up over the time is not building up that rivalry between Oakland and San Francisco, because you could have had a lot of fans in San Francisco feel more akin to like the blue collar A's, just kind of like you have people in North Chicago who feel more akin to the South Side White Sox. And I just think that same relationship could have been built in time to save that. But I would still play off of that, because people in Vegas are a little more, you're going to have to get your locals to support this. But also you want your old A's fans to continue to support it. So I would keep Vegas with the West rather than trying to figure out how to have them with those mountain teams and then who else with.
One of the things I think that people who aren't familiar with the state of Utah is the regionality. You've got Idaho, you've got Wyoming, you got Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada all border the state. And you got five states that border the same state.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get I'll give you a quick, for instance, the Kansas City Royals draw, people from Nebraska to their games. It's not like it's, just if they had to survive just on, Missouri and in the Kansas area, they would be doomed because there's just not enough people.
Yeah, and those are the type of people though that you get come to 1, 2, maybe 5 games, right? Like, and you have to get that as well. But I just mean like your core group that will buy season tickets, that will come to double-digit number of games a year. Those are going to be like, even as you're saying with the Rays, that's a local situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that there's enough concentrated wealth now in Salt Lake City because it's been coming from California, and it's a lot of people who are kind of getting away from that. So I think that they are willing to embrace that local culture and kind of build up this new metropolitan there it's not from the ground up, but in terms of like being considered a large city, it is kind of from the ground up. I think that you could do it there. And yes, having all those local areas, have people come in for 1, 2, 3 games a year or whatever, always helps. But they would have to find a way to really draw the locality in order to fill the 162 game schedule.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have to wrap this stuff up here at 1:00. it's great to have you, Brian. Come on. And if I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you right now, what are you doing tomorrow? But I know we never got to the CFP deal, which I think both Matthew, myself, we all want to weigh in and have some fun with that. So you're welcome back tomorrow if you can make it. If not, we'll put that on the shelf and take it next time you're available.
I think we could possibly sneak it in. I'll have to take a look at my schedule and we'll talk about it. But yeah, it's certainly possible.
All right. Well, I greatly appreciate it. And Matthew, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think this type of discussion is interesting because I do think baseball is missing a sense of, I guess, rivalries across, significant rivalries across the sport. You have some of the bigger ones: Cubs, Cardinals, Dodgers, Giants, Red Sox, Yankees. But once you get outside of the big ones, there's no real understanding of the rivalries in baseball, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's his biggest problem. All the rest of the teams are support teams for the major brands, right? You go in, you get your butts kicked. The major teams go to the playoffs, rinse and repeat. That's been the way the league has worked, and I just think you have to maximize across the board now that population changes have happened in these markets.
Well, one last thing. When we were just talking, when there has been rivalries, when there's been battles within divisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the you could say that the argument, and I attest to this because I covered it when it was happening, when the Big Red Machine and the Pirates were battling each year in the playoffs. The rivalry between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati was brutal. That was one of the best in baseball at the time. So it just depends on where you are proximity wise, and also how good is the team. If these teams are battling each other for playoff spots, then you create rivalries.
Yeah, and if you have these little triangles and groupings,
mm-hmm.
There's a good chance that two of your teams at least are they're going to be battling in a given year. If you have Cincinnati and Cleveland and Pittsburgh there, and Detroit not too far away, there's going to be some kind of a local divisional race. Detroit and Toronto is actually a thing. You open my eyes to that.
Yeah.
So I would say even if there hasn't been much history to them or not much interest in them because they're in different divisions and different leagues, if you put them in the same division, the divisional race, with localities involved, people are going to be going over to the visiting team's games for this. That's how you build up a rivalry. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff. And as someone who hasn't really been closely interested in baseball in a while, I find that to be interesting. Even just here in Arizona, there is some hatred here of Salt Lake City because they took the hockey team,
right? Which
also some people don't care because they now want a new hockey team here with different ownership. But none the point. This is kind of how local rivalries are built, and I just think it's the winning combo. I think they need to start embracing every team now, not just your massive market teams.
Okay, we're going to end on that. Guys, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully the three of us can get back tomorrow. We can talk a little CFP, and everybody likes talking football, so we will get back to that tomorrow. All right, guys, thanks again very much for joining us, and those of you who had questions and also joined us on the live stream, greatly appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Sorry to put you on the spot there about tomorrow.